Good morning, guys. Welcome back to the series. We're in Mark's Gospel, the beginning of chapter 15 now. Jesus has been handed over to the chief priests with an illegal trial in the middle of the night. And now here, very early the next morning, it tells us that they're going to take him over and hand him over to Pilate. Now, Pilate was the Roman governor over all of Judea. He was the man in charge. He was the representative of the emperor of Rome himself, Caesar. As these guys take Jesus to Pilate, he asks him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus simply says, "Yes, it's as you say." And then the chief priests accuse him of many things. So Pilate again asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things these people are accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply. And Pilate was amazed. And I really want to hone in on that today, that Jesus made no reply. Jesus remained silent. And this is actually harking back to an Old Testament prophecy. The prophet Isaiah, 700 years before Jesus, predicted the coming of the Messiah who would remain silent. In verse 7 of Isaiah 53, he writes, "He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth." And then Isaiah goes on to talk a lot about Jesus. Isaiah 53, go and read that chapter as a picture of Jesus being led to Pilate, to the chief priests, and toward his crucifixion. But back to Pilate and back to Jerusalem on that day, Pilate is amazed that Jesus has no answer. He knows that Jesus is innocent, that it's just out of envy that these guys have arrested him or are handing him over. And it was a custom at the time, Passover, for Pilate to release one criminal. And so he offers the people, "Shall I release to you Jesus?" But the chief priests stir up the people and they ask for Barabbas. Barabbas was basically a terrorist of the day, a murderer, an insurrectionist. He was no good, and yet the people called for him to be released rather than Jesus. And it says in verse 15, wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. Here is the very first person set free because Jesus was willing to go to the cross. He wouldn't be the last, but he was the very first. And if you've ever felt unworthy to be forgiven, well, take a look at Barabbas. He was the worst of the worst, and yet Jesus took his place on the cross. Jesus' death means salvation and forgiveness for any who would receive it unto themselves, including the worst of us. And if that's offensive to you, then hear this. God tends to use what offends us to display his incredible, uncompromising grace. If God doesn't put a limit to his mercy and his grace, and he's willing to take the place of the worst of humankind, then who are we to put a limit on his mercy and grace? All we can do is simply receive it for ourselves. God bless you guys.